The planet Ruin 9 had been silent for years. Once it was a busy mining colony filled with machines, miners, and merchants. Now it was a desert of metal bones, buried cables, and broken towers. The wind carried the sound of sand scraping against steel, and every structure seemed to whisper the memory of a life that had vanished long ago. When the Galactic Trade Board listed Ruin 9 for sale, no one showed interest. The world was far from the major routes, the mines were dry, and the atmosphere was harsh. Only one person made an offer, a human trader named Milan. He was known for buying forgotten places that no one wanted. People called him foolish, yet sometimes he turned those ruins into profit. When he saw the listing price of only 100 credits, he smiled. That amount was less than the cost of a small cargo crate. Without much thought, he made the purchase. Milan had spent half his life traveling between colonies. He had seen rich worlds where cities floated in the sky and poor stations where people traded air filters for food. What drew him to Ruin 9 was not just its price, but its mystery. Records showed the colony's shutdown was never completed. The last signal from Ruin 9 was a short distress code sent 7 years ago, and no one ever followed it up. Curiosity was a powerful thing for him. He wanted to see what was left. He arrived in his small ship, the Wandering Star, guided by a weak orbital beacon that blinked like a lonely light in darkness. As he entered the atmosphere, storms raged below. Yellow clouds twisted over empty plains. The remains of solar towers stood like skeletons against the horizon. His ship landed near the main colony dome, where faded letters still read Ruin 9 Resource Site Alpha. When the landing ramp opened, dry air rushed in. Milan stepped out wearing a breathing mask. His boots sank slightly into the dust. The silence was deep, so deep that even his heartbeat sounded loud. The colony buildings stood half-collapsed, their metal walls corroded by sand and time. He walked slowly, scanning with his wrist device for signs of power or life. The readings came back flat, showing nothing alive. He made his way through the main street, once lined with shops and miner quarters. There were broken signs, rusted pipes, and doors that creaked in the wind. He stopped in front of an old energy station. Its roof was damaged, but the inner walls still stood. He decided it would make a good temporary base. Using his toolkit, he repaired one of the doors and placed a small generator inside. The soft hum of power broke the endless quiet. After setting up camp, Milan cooked a simple meal from his ship's supplies. He sat beside the light of the generator, eating slowly and looking at the walls around him. Each crack told a story of time and neglect. He imagined the miners who once laughed and argued here, their voices now long gone. He wondered what had really happened to them. The official report only said the mine ran dry, but he felt there was more. When night fell on Ruin 9, 2 moons rose above the horizon, casting silver light across the colony. Milan decided to take one more walk before resting. He carried a small lamp and followed the narrow streets toward the central hub. The wind had died down and the air was still. That was when he heard it, a faint sound coming from one of the distant buildings. It was soft and strange, almost like humming. He froze. No animal should have survived this long here. The sound came again. A gentle melody carried through the empty street. He followed it carefully, his hand near the grip of his side tool, a small, non-lethal pulse weapon. The sound led him to an old power station, its outer lights flickering weakly. That was impossible. He had checked the grid earlier and found it completely dead. Pushing the door open, Milan entered. Inside, the air was warmer. Old equipment lined the walls, some still glowing faintly. And there, sitting near a cracked console, was a figure. At first he thought it was a human worker, but then the light revealed skin that shimmered faintly in silver tones. The figure turned toward him and he saw her clearly, an alien woman, eyes bright like molten glass. She held a small glowing pod close to her chest. For a long moment neither spoke. Milan was too shocked to move. The woman looked at him with guarded fear. Her voice, when it came, was soft but firm. "Leave this place," she said in broken human speech. "It is not for you." Milan raised his hands to show peace. "I am not here to harm you," he said calmly. "This colony was abandoned. I bought it from the trade board. I thought no one was left." She studied him without lowering the pod. The light inside the pod pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. "But," she repeated quietly, "you think you can buy what is not yours." Her words confused him. "I only came to rebuild what was left." "Who are you?" he asked. She did not answer. Instead, she looked down at the pod, whispering something in her language. Milan realized she was not alone. The pod held something alive, perhaps a child. He stepped back slowly to show he meant no harm. "I did not know anyone was here," he said. "If this is your home, I can leave." The woman's eyes softened slightly. "You will not last a night outside," she said. "Storms will rise again. You stay here. Tomorrow we talk," Milan agreed. He could tell she did not trust him, and he could not blame her. He moved to a corner of the room and set down his pack. The woman watched him carefully, never turning her back. She placed the pod beside her and adjusted a blanket around it. The pod's glow dimmed and silence returned. Through the long night, Milan stayed awake, thinking. An alien living alone on a dead world was something no record had mentioned. He wondered what species she belonged to. Her features were delicate and her movements were graceful but weary. She looked like someone who had carried too many burdens for too long. The next morning, sunlight entered through broken windows. Milan woke to the sound of quiet movements. The woman was fixing a small device on the wall, a water recycler. The machine sputtered weakly. Milan walked closer and offered help. "I can repair that," he said. She hesitated, then nodded once. Together they worked in silence. Milan used his tools to replace a burnt filter, and soon clean water began to flow into a small container. She looked at him with surprise. "You know machines," she said simply. "I work with colonies," he replied. "Machines are my friends." For the first time, she smiled a little. It was brief but real. "My name is Liren," she said finally. "I was part of the old colony. When the others left, I stayed. Why?" Milan asked gently. She looked toward the pod. "Because of him, my son. He was born when everything fell apart. The others could not take him. They said it was too dangerous. So I remained." Milan felt a mix of respect and sadness. He had seen many tough beings in his travels, but few with such quiet strength. He wanted to ask more, but he saw the tiredness in her eyes. Instead, he offered her some food from his supplies. She accepted cautiously, tasting it before giving a small piece to her child inside the pod. For the next few hours, they spoke little. Milan repaired damaged panels and checked nearby buildings. Liren watched him work, her guard slowly lowering. The more he explored, the more he realized Ruin 9 was not as empty as it seemed. Some systems were still active, kept running by Liren's efforts. There were small power cells hidden around the colony, providing enough energy to maintain basic life support. As evening approached, the wind began to rise again, carrying fine dust across the horizon. Liren motioned for him to seal the door. "Storm coming," she warned. He followed her instructions, locking the panels tight. Outside, the storm howled, turning the sky orange and black. Inside, the faint hum of the recycler and the soft glow of the pod gave the room a strange warmth. Milan looked at the alien mother and her child. He realized that this world was not truly dead. Life had endured here, fragile but stubborn. He thought about the 100 credits he had spent and how meaningless that number now felt. What he had found was far beyond any trade or deal. He had found a secret that should have been lost to time. Liren sat near the console, holding the pod gently. "You should not have come," she said quietly. "Humans bring change. Sometimes good, sometimes not." Milan met her eyes. "Maybe this time it can be good," he said. She said nothing more, but her silence was not cold. It was thoughtful, uncertain. As the storm raged outside, Milan felt that this was only the beginning. The ghost town he had bought was not just a forgotten place. It was a world with a heartbeat waiting to be heard again. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind. Somewhere in the distance, the broken colony whispered to itself, as if welcoming back the first visitor in many years. And deep inside, beneath the silence, hope began to stir. When morning light filtered through the cracked glass of the old power station, Milan opened his eyes to the sound of quiet humming. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the memory returned. Ruin 9, the ghost town he had bought for only 100 credits, and the alien woman named Liren, who had told him to stay the night. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm metal. Outside, the wind had calmed after the long storm. He stood up and stretched his arms, hearing the soft clicking of broken ceiling panels above him. Liren was already awake, sitting near a console that glowed weakly. Beside her, the small pod pulsed with gentle light. Milan could see the outline of a tiny shape inside, moving slowly as if dreaming. "Good morning," Milan said quietly. His voice broke the silence. Liren looked up, her eyes calm but cautious. "Morning," she replied. Her accent made the word sound musical. The storm passed. "You can move again," Milan nodded. "I was planning to explore the rest of the colony. There might still be working systems that can help both of us." Liren watched him carefully. "Why help?" she asked. "You came here to claim land, not to fix it." He smiled faintly. "Because I don't like dead worlds. I like to make things alive again." She said nothing, only turned her attention back to the pod. Milan noticed how gently she touched it, how protective she was. He understood that everything she did was for her child. That thought made him respect her even more. Before leaving, Milan shared his water pack and a piece of dried fruit from his supplies. Liren accepted, breaking the fruit in half. One half she ate, the other she placed beside the pod, whispering something in her own language. Milan guessed it was a blessing or a habit of comfort. He stepped out into the open air. The colony stretched before him like a forgotten maze. Sunlight bounced off metallic surfaces and sand shimmered across the empty roads. He carried his scanner and tool bag, following the faint signal of old power lines. Some of the buried cables were still warm, drawing energy from hidden sources. Milan traced the lines to a small dome near the edge of the colony. Its door was half buried in sand. He cleared the entrance and forced it open. Inside, he found a storage room filled with rusted containers and tools. The air smelled old, but the light still flickered weakly. He checked the walls and found a half-working energy node. If repaired, it could power several buildings again. He spent the next few hours cleaning and fixing circuits. It was tiring work, but Milan had done this kind of repair on many dead colonies. When he connected the final wire, the node came to life. A hum spread through the floor, and lights across nearby buildings flickered to life. The sight filled him with pride. It was the first sign of life Ruin 9 had shown in years. Back in the power station, Liren noticed the change. Lights brightened overhead and the air became warmer. She looked outside and saw the faint glow spreading across the street. For the first time in many years, she felt hope. She turned toward the pod, her expression softening. "The world breathes again," she whispered. When Milan returned, sweat covered his forehead and his clothes were dusty. Liren met him at the door. "You repaired it," she said. "I did not believe it was possible." "It was not easy," Milan said, smiling. "But the system still works. You kept it alive all these years." "That helped." Liren's gaze dropped for a moment. "I only kept enough power to protect us. Nothing more." Milan sat down near the generator and drank water. "That alone kept this place from turning to dust," he said. "You did more than enough." She studied him silently, trying to read his intentions. Many humans she had known before were loud, greedy, and careless. But Milan spoke softly, worked quietly, and never demanded anything. Still, trust did not come easily. The memory of what had happened to her people was too painful. Later that day, Milan asked permission to see more of the colony. Liren hesitated but finally nodded. "Stay close to the center," she warned. "The old tunnels are unstable." He promised to be careful. As he explored deeper, he found signs that Ruin 9 had once been full of life. There were posters written in several languages, old robotic loaders lying in the dust and walls scratched with messages left by miners before they fled. He could almost hear their voices through the wind. In the control tower, Milan found a partially working terminal. He spent hours fixing it, wiping off sand and reconnecting memory chips. When the screen came alive, old data logs appeared. The last recorded message showed the colony's shutdown order, but also something strange. The miners had reported strange underground vibrations and unknown energy readings before they abandoned the site. Milan copied the files to his wrist device. He wanted to ask Liren about it later. As he returned, he saw her standing outside with the pod in her arms. The sunlight caught her silver skin, making her look almost like a statue carved from light. She seemed nervous. "What's wrong?" he asked. "There are ships in orbit," she said quietly. "I saw their shadows on the scanner. They pass but do not land." "Maybe traders," Milan said. "Or surveyors. Or scavengers," Liren replied. Her voice held worry. "They come sometimes. They search for old tech or weapons. They never stay long, but if they see power again, they may return." Milan nodded, understanding. "Then we keep the lights low for now. We rebuild quietly." That evening, they sat together inside the power station. Liren finally asked about his home. Milan told her about the human colonies near the inner worlds. The busy spaceports, the endless markets, and the ocean planets filled with cities that floated on waves. Lyraean listened with quiet curiosity. Humans build much, she said, but do they remember what they destroy? Milan thought about it before answering. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But we try to learn. Not all humans are the same. She looked at him thoughtfully. You are different, she said. You fix things. Most who come here only take. I fix because someone has to, he said with a smile. Besides, I paid 100 credits for this place. I should at least make it worth something. Lyraean gave a small laugh. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. The sound was soft but beautiful. You will need more than credits to live here, she said. Over the next few days, they worked together. Milan restored the water system and repaired several damaged shelters. Lyraean showed him where underground storage rooms were located and helped him find hidden energy cells she had stored long ago. Slowly, the ghost town began to show signs of renewal. Lights flickered again at night. The air purifiers hummed. Even the broken communication tower stood straighter after Milan's repairs. One evening, when they were repairing a damaged walkway, Lyraean paused and asked, Why did you really come here, Milan? Not just for business. He looked up at the twin moons and took a slow breath. Because I was tired of trading things that meant nothing, he said. Everywhere I went, I saw people rushing for profit. I wanted to build something with my own hands. A place that could matter. Lyraean nodded slowly. Then maybe you chose the right graveyard to rebuild. He smiled. Maybe it is not a graveyard anymore. That night, as they ate together, the pod beside them opened slightly. Inside, a small child lay sleeping peacefully. Its skin glowed faintly like Lyraean's, and tiny silver hair shone under the light. Milan looked at the child with wonder. He is beautiful, he said softly. What is his name? Lyraean hesitated. His name is Real. It means new dawn in my language. Milan smiled. A good name. Maybe he will see this town alive again. She looked at her son and then at Milan. Maybe, she said, though her eyes showed both hope and fear. In the days that followed, Milan built a small power grid using salvaged batteries and panels. Lyraean taught him about her people's old technology, simple but elegant designs that worked in harmony with the environment. Together, they repaired systems that had not worked for years. They became partners in survival. But one morning, as Milan was outside checking the solar lines, he noticed something strange. The wind carried a faint metallic scent, and the sand near the horizon seemed disturbed. He used his scope and saw distant shapes moving, small drones flying low to the ground. They were not his. He hurried back to the station. Lyraean, we have visitors, he said. Machines, maybe scouts. Her face turned pale. Then they found us, she whispered. We must stay inside. Who are they? Milan asked. Scavengers or data hunters, she said. They come for what is buried below the mines. That is why I stayed. There is something under Ruin 9 they should never take. Milan wanted to ask more, but she placed a finger to her lips. Not now, she said. We wait until night. As the sun set, they watched from the window as the small drones passed by, scanning buildings but not entering. After a while, they flew off toward the mountains. Only then did Lyraean speak again. There is a secret beneath this place, she said. My people built something before the fall. It still sleeps under the mines. If others find it, they will use it for war. That is why I cannot leave. Milan looked at her with steady eyes. Then I will help you protect it, he said. You would risk your life for something that is not yours? She asked. He nodded. If it means saving a mother and her child and maybe a little hope for this place, yes. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she smiled faintly. You are a strange human, Milan. Strange is better than selfish, he replied. That night, the wind carried the scent of rain from far away, and for the first time in many years, drops began to fall on Rouen. The following days brought a change that even the wind of Ruin 9 could feel. The empty streets that had once echoed with silence now carried the faint sound of work and life. Milan spent each morning repairing cables, welding frames, and cleaning old storage domes. Lyraean helped where she could, though she often stayed near the pod where her child slept. Every small success felt like a step toward rebirth. Milan had found a rhythm to his days. He woke early, checked the power readings, and then walked through the colony with a list of repairs written on his wristpad. The once dark settlement began to glow softly at night. powered by the restored solar lines. He built small lamps along the walkways, their lights cutting through the dust. When he looked across the revived streets, he imagined what this place could become again. A home. Lorraine watched him work with quiet amazement. She had lived alone for so long that the idea of another person rebuilding her broken world felt almost unreal. Each time Milan repaired something, she felt as though a wound in the colony's heart was healing. One morning, when he repaired a water pipe that had been broken for years, she stood beside him and whispered, "You make this place breathe again." Milan smiled. It still has a long way to go, but life always finds a way back. He did not say it out loud, but inside he felt proud. This was more than a job or a purchase. It was a promise, to himself and to the memory of those who had once lived here. He wanted to give the colony back its light. As the days passed, Liren began to trust him more. She even let him hold her child once. The baby's skin shimmered faintly like polished silver under sunlight. Its small hands moved gently, curious about everything. Milan had never seen a being like this before. "He looks strong," Milan said softly. "He is," Liren replied with pride. "He carries both the old and the new. My kind was not meant to survive here, but he will." Her words carried a deep meaning. Milan understood that her child represented the future of her people, perhaps even their last hope. He felt honored that she trusted him enough to share that part of her world. One evening, as the twin moons rose, a storm rolled in from the horizon. The winds were fierce, carrying heavy sand that stung the skin. Milan ran through the streets, checking the solar panels and sealing open doors. Larian stayed inside, protecting her child. The storm grew stronger with each passing minute, shaking the colony with thunderous roars. Milan's generator lights flickered, and then one of the main power lines snapped. Without power, the protective shields that guarded the inner colony began to fail. The outer lights dimmed one by one and dust filled the air. Milan realized that if the storm broke through, the old buildings would not hold. He grabbed his tools and ran toward the generator room, fighting the wind. Inside, the noise was deafening. Sand hissed through cracks and sparks flashed from broken circuits. Milan's hands worked quickly, his fingers numb from cold air. He pulled out burnt wires, replaced fuses, and reconnected the grid. The lights flickered weakly, then went out again. He cursed under his breath and kept working, refusing to give up. Back at the power station, Liren watched the readings drop on the control screen. Fear filled her chest. She wanted to go after him, but she could not leave her child. She looked down at the pod, then back at the storm outside. Her heart pounded. Finally, she made a choice. Wrapping her child in a soft blanket, she placed him inside a small safety cradle that locked automatically, then ran out into the storm. The wind hit her like a wall. Dust tore at her clothes and skin, and she could barely see more than a few steps ahead. But she followed the faint light from Milan's lamp in the distance. When she reached the generator building, she found him on his knees, fighting to hold a cable that sparked with energy. "Milan," she shouted, "you will be killed." He turned toward her, eyes wide from exhaustion. "It needs one more connection. The grid can still hold." Without hesitation, Liren moved beside him. Together they lifted the heavy cable and secured it in place. Sparks flew around them, lighting the air with blue flashes. When the final switch was locked, the generator roared back to life. Light surged through the wires, spreading power across the colony. The storm lights came back on, glowing like a chain of stars through the night. Milan dropped to the ground, breathing hard. Liren fell beside him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. For a moment, neither spoke. They listened to the steady hum of energy, proof that their hard work had saved Ruan 9 again. When the storm finally passed, dawn painted the sky with orange light. Milan and Liren stood on a high platform, watching the sunlight fall across the repaired streets. The colony looked alive again. The power grids hummed and the air shimmered with warmth. Liren turned to Milan and said, "You risked your life for this place." He smiled tiredly. "I wasn't alone. You saved me too." Her silver eyes softened. Maybe this world wanted both of us to survive. From that day, their bond grew stronger. They worked together as equals, sharing food, tools, and stories. Milan told her about the places he had seen, giant space stations filled with light and noise, asteroid cities carved into rock, and human colonies that grew food in the air. Lirian told him about her people's past, their peaceful culture, their harmony with nature, and how greed had destroyed their unity. Her voice was sad when she spoke of the fall. "They came for the energy below our feet," she said one night. "It was pure and powerful. My people tried to protect it, but war followed and the colony died." Milan looked down at the dusty ground beneath them. "And you stayed here all alone?" "Yes," she said softly, "because I could not let our secret fall into wrong hands. My child was born when the war ended. I promised he would see peace even if I had to keep it myself." He nodded, respecting her strength. "You have kept that promise well." Over the next few weeks, Milan began to plan a larger rebuild. He wanted to open old communication towers to send a signal to the nearby star lanes, inviting settlers or traders who could help rebuild. Liren hesitated when he told her, "If you send signals, others will come. Some will help, but others will not." "I understand," he said, "but if we keep hiding forever, this place will die again. We need people, resources, and trade. We can make rules, protect your secret, and still grow." She thought about it for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "Then we do it together." They climbed to the top of the main tower, which stood tall but unstable. Milan checked the panels while Lyrian reactivated the transmitter. The wind was cold that day and clouds rolled across the sky. After hours of repair, the transmitter began to hum. Milan typed a short message on the console. "Ruin 9 open for settlers. Safe harbor. Trade welcome." He looked at Liren before pressing the send button. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said. The signal went out into the stars, traveling across the dark void where no message from Ruin 9 had been sent in years. For a moment they both stood in silence, watching the blinking light on the transmitter. Liren's expression was thoughtful. Once this light meant danger. Now it means hope, Milan nodded. Every world deserves another chance. Days passed. They continued their work, repairing, planting small crops in old containers, and building shelter walls. Milan taught Liren some human methods for growing food in artificial soil. She, in return, showed him how to mix minerals from the sand to make strong building materials. Together they built something new, a mixture of human and alien design. One evening, while checking the horizon, Milan noticed movement. A small ship was descending through the sky. It was not large, more like a trader's transport. He called Lyrian over. Someone answered our signal. Her face tensed. "Let us hope they come as friends." The ship landed near the outer dome. Milan approached carefully, holding his scanner ready but not threatening. The hatch opened and two figures stepped out wearing dusty flight suits. One of them waved. "We received your beacon." "Is this Ruin 9? The pilot asked. "Yes," Milan said. "I am Milan, the owner of this colony. Welcome." The visitors looked around in surprise. "We thought this place was abandoned." "It was," Milan said, "but not anymore." Lyrian stayed hidden behind a structure, watching quietly. She was not ready to reveal herself yet. Milan spoke with the visitors, trading information and offering shelter. They seemed honest enough, miners looking for a new start. When they left, promising to return with supplies, Milan felt hopeful. But he also noticed that Lyren's eyes were still filled with concern. "Do you trust them?" she asked later. "I want to," he said, "but I will stay alert." "Good," she replied, "because every light that shines draws both friends and hunters." That night, Ruin 9 glowed brighter than ever. The buildings hummed with power and the streets looked almost new. Milan and Lyrian stood side by side, looking over their work. The air was calm, and the stars shone like diamonds above them. "This world will live again," Milan said quietly. "Yes," Lyrian replied, "but it must live with wisdom. If others come, they must learn what we learned here." He nodded. "We will teach them." As the wind brushed across the rooftops, the ghost town no longer felt empty. It was becoming a place of hope. The human and the alien mother had given it a second chance. They had survived the storm, rebuilt the walls, and brought back the light. Yet deep beneath the surface, where the mines reached into darkness, something ancient still slept, waiting for the day it would awaken again. The town of Ruin 9 no longer looked like a graveyard of metal and dust. For the first time in many years, the wind carried the sound of life. Solar panels gleamed under the twin suns. Power lines buzzed softly. The water pumps in the center square released a steady stream, and the air smelled cleaner than before. Milan stood on top of a small platform near the generator station, adjusting the final connections. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled as the lights across the main street turned bright once again. He felt proud. What was once only sand and silence was now breathing again. He remembered the first time he had landed here thinking he was alone. Now the town had warmth, purpose, and even laughter. Liren's small child often giggled while chasing the small drone Milan had repaired. The child loved pressing buttons and following the glowing trails of the drone's lights. Liren, once distant and quiet, had begun speaking more openly. She still guarded many secrets, but she no longer treated Milan as an intruder. That evening, Milan sat near the main square, resting against a crate as the twin suns started to fade. The orange glow bathed the broken buildings in soft light. Liren walked toward him carrying a bowl of water and 2 pieces of dried fruit she had found in storage. "You work too much," she said in her soft voice. "Even the machines need to rest." Milan smiled at her words. "If I stop, the sand will return and bury all of this again." Liren sat beside him. "You rebuilt more than machines. You rebuilt hope." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind whistle between the metal structures. It was peaceful. Milan closed his eyes, thinking that maybe this forgotten world could become something new. He imagined travelers landing here, seeing the lights and deciding to stay. He imagined trade routes passing through, families settling, and Ruin 9 becoming more than just a ghost town. But peace rarely lasts long in a galaxy filled with greed. Far above the planet, an old satellite blinked awake. It had been buried in the storm clouds for years, forgotten by the mining company that once owned Ruin 9. Milan's new power grids had sent a strong signal into orbit, and that signal reached the satellite. It transmitted a message across the stars, a message that said the town was alive again. 3 days later, the sensors on Milan's ship detected movement. He frowned as he looked at the small screen on his wrist device. A ship was approaching from orbit, large enough to carry weapons. He quickly ran toward the communications post near the center of town. "Liren," he called, his voice serious. "We have company." Liren appeared within seconds, holding her child close. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Who are they?" "I don't know yet," Milan answered, scanning the incoming data. "But the ship's markings show a salvage group. They must have caught the activation signal." Liren's expression changed from calm to sharp. Salvagers never come for peace. They come for what they can take. The ship landed on the edge of town in a cloud of dust. 3 figures stepped out, their armor dull and worn from travel. The leader was a tall human with a heavy rifle across his shoulder. His name, according to the data tag, was Rusk. He had the kind of face that smiled without kindness. "Nice place you've got here," Rusk said, walking closer. "Didn't expect anyone alive." Milan stood firm. "This is private property. You have no claim here." Rusk laughed. "Private property? You think anyone cares about that out here? We got a signal that said this site is active again. Active means valuable. We want to look around." Before Milan could answer, one of Rusk's men pointed toward the main building where Liren stood in the doorway. "Boss, there's an alien." Rusk turned his head slowly. His grin faded as he noticed the glowing pod in her arms. "Well, look at that. A survivor." Liren stepped back, her eyes cold and her body tense. "You have no right to be here," she said firmly. Rusk ignored her words and looked back at Milan. "You didn't tell me there were locals still alive. That means there might be more of them. Maybe some hidden storage or tech. We'll take a look." Milan moved in front of him. "You'll leave now." Rusk chuckled and tapped his rifle. "Or what, you'll fix my ship to death?" Milan's heart pounded, but he did not step aside. "This place belongs to those who live here, not those who steal from it." Liren raised her hand and a faint blue light formed around her palm. The air shimmered for a moment. Rusk's men stopped moving, their eyes wide. Milan had never seen her use such power before. Rusk raised his rifle. "Stand down, alien." Before he could fire, Milan shouted, "Stop! Enough!" Liren lowered her hand but kept her eyes on Rusk. The light faded, but her anger did not. "You don't understand," Liren said, her voice trembling with control. "Beneath this ground lies something your kind would kill for. That is why my people stayed. That is why I cannot let you near it." Rusk smirked. "Something valuable, huh? Now I'm really interested." Without warning, he threw a signal beacon onto the ground. It flashed red and started transmitting coordinates to his ship. Milan realized that soon more scavengers would come. He turned to Liren and whispered, "We have to protect the town. We can't let them take it." That night, under the dim glow of emergency lights, Milan and Liren worked side by side. They activated the old mining drones, programming them for defense. The drones were small, built for digging, but Milan reconfigured their sensors to target incoming hostiles. They had limited power, but it would be enough to slow the salvagers down. Lyrian showed him hidden passageways beneath the main structures. These tunnels led to the old vault where ancient energy cores were kept. Her people had once mined them for power, but they had realized the cores were unstable. If disturbed, they could destroy the entire area. That was why her people never left. Someone had to guard the vault. I was the last one chosen to stay, she said quietly as they moved through the dark tunnel. When the others left or died, I remained. The energy must never fall into the wrong hands. Milan nodded. Then we'll make sure it doesn't. The next morning, the salvagers returned with reinforcements. A second ship hovered above, casting shadows over the street. Drones flew from its cargo bay, scanning the ground. Rusk stood in the middle of the square, shouting commands. Milan, come out, he called. You can still walk away from this. Just hand over the alien and whatever she's hiding. Milan stepped forward, unarmed but unafraid. There's nothing here worth your lives. Rusk laughed again. I'll decide what's worth what. As his men advanced, the mining drones activated. The ground shook slightly as the small machines rolled from the tunnels, their lights blinking red. They surrounded the town and began firing warning blasts into the air. The salvagers ducked for cover. What in the stars is this? One shouted. Old mining security, Milan answered. Still loyal to the owner. The drones fired at the salvage ship, striking its landing gear and damaging the engines. Smoke filled the air. Lyran appeared behind Milan, holding her child close but standing tall. Her eyes shone brighter than ever. You will not take what is not yours, she said. Rusk tried to retreat, but Milan activated the magnetic field from the power station, trapping the salvagers inside the square. The air shimmered as energy crackled across the field. The salvagers dropped their weapons, realizing they were beaten. Rusk looked at Milan with hate. You'll regret this. The galaxy will hear about this place. Milan's voice was calm. Let them hear. Let them know this world belongs to those who protect it, not those who exploit it. Rusk and his crew were forced to leave in their damaged ship. As they disappeared into the sky, Milan deactivated the defense drones and turned to Lyran. The storm had passed, but the air still buzzed with tension. Lyran held her child close and looked at Milan with gratitude. You risked your life for this town, she said softly. Milan shook his head. I did what was right. You were the one who stayed all these years. This world is yours as much as mine. That night they walked through the quiet streets together. The stars above were brighter than ever, reflecting on the metal roofs of the rebuilt homes. The town was safe for now, but both knew the signal had gone far and others might come one day. Still, as the wind calmed and the hum of the generators filled the air, Milan felt a deep peace. He had defended more than a town. He had defended trust, hope, and the bond between two distant lives that had found meaning on a forgotten world. The lights of Ruan 9 glowed against the night sky, a small reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, life could fight back and shine again. The morning sunlight spilled across Ruan 9, touching every street, every building, and every small garden that Milan and Lyran had begun to cultivate. The air smelled faintly of wet sand and new growth. It was a morning unlike any the ghost town had seen in decades. The once empty streets were alive with soft sounds, the whirring of drones, the trickle of water from repaired pumps, and the laughter of Lyran's child, Ril, chasing a small mechanical bird Milan had built. Milan stood on a platform near the main square, looking at the transformation. Each building he had repaired now glowed with life, powered by the solar grid he had carefully restored. Some buildings were still old and battered, but they had character, and he imagined the day when families would fill them again. Lyran appeared at his side, carrying a container of clean water and a small tray of freshly grown vegetables. She smiled at the sight of the town. You see, she said softly, it is no longer a ghost. Milan nodded. It is alive because we refuse to give up. For the first time since arriving, Ruan 9 felt like a home. They had worked tirelessly together, overcoming storms, scavengers, and old broken systems. The ghost town was no longer a place of silence but of hope. Milan realized that what he had thought would be a simple purchase of property had become a mission to preserve life, protect secrets, and build a future. Their work had attracted attention. Slowly, settlers arrived. The first group were traders and technicians who had seen Milan's signal and felt curiosity and trust in his words. They carried supplies, tools, and the energy to continue repairs. Milan welcomed them with care, guiding them through the streets and showing them which buildings could be used immediately. Liren watched quietly, standing behind Milan at first, but gradually stepping forward as the newcomers began to respect her presence. The settlers were cautious. They had heard rumors about Ruan 9 being abandoned for years. Some believed the planet held dangers, while others sought lost technology. When they saw Milan and the protective drones and met Liren, they understood that this was a place worth protecting. Slowly, their skepticism turned to cooperation. Days turned into weeks. The town thrived as the settlers repaired old structures, built new ones, and planted small gardens. Milan oversaw the work, but Liren's knowledge became indispensable. She taught the humans how to use the old energy systems efficiently and how to protect the underground vault without disturbing the sensitive technology within. Her instructions were precise, and the settlers began to trust her guidance. One morning, as Milan and Liren walked through the main street, they noticed Real toddling beside them, giggling and trying to chase a small wind-driven toy. Milan reached down and lifted him gently. "He grows fast," Milan said with a smile. Liren nodded. "He is learning from both of us. He will know both the past and the future." The child's laughter was infectious. It drew attention from the settlers, who paused their work to watch. Some of them whispered about the miracle of a single alien mother surviving alone for so many years. Others marveled at the determination of a human willing to risk so much to protect her and the town. As the town grew, so did its defenses. Milan and Liren installed better drones, created patrols, and built walls to mark the boundary of the town. They knew the galaxy was vast and threats could arrive at any time. But they also knew that unity and trust were stronger than fear. The settlers began to understand that they were not just repairing a town, they were part of a living community, guided by the courage of two unlikely guardians. One evening after a long day of work, Milan and Liren stood on a small hill overlooking Ruan 9. The lights of the town twinkled like stars reflected on the ground. The wind carried the soft hum of the generators and the chatter of settlers. For the first time, Milan felt a deep peace. "You did all this," Liren said softly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the town. "You believed in this place when it seemed empty and hopeless." Milan shook his head. "We did it together. You kept the light alive while I repaired the machines. You protected Rill. Without you, none of this would exist." Liren's eyes softened. "I never expected someone to stay and help. I thought the town would always be empty. But you changed that," Milan smiled. "And you changed me. This town is not just bricks and circuits. It is life, hope, and family." They walked back toward the main square where settlers had gathered to watch the first ceremony of Ruan 9's revival. Milan had organized a small celebration to honor the hard work and to mark a new beginning. Lanterns were lit, meals were shared, and everyone contributed to the decorations. Children played in the repaired streets, and even the smallest drones joined the celebration, their lights blinking in rhythm with the joy around them. Liren stayed near the center, holding Rill, watching him laugh and reach for the floating lights. She felt a warmth she had not felt in years. The fear of losing her child, the burden of guarding secrets, and the isolation of living alone, all of it was being replaced by trust and hope. She realized that Milan and the settlers had become her family. As night fell and the twin moons rose, the air of Ruan 9 shimmered with energy. The town, once abandoned and silent, was now alive and vibrant. The settlers had begun to create new stories, new memories, and new dreams. Milan and Liren watched quietly, knowing they had helped turn a ghost town into a home. But life was not just work and celebration. Milan and Liren knew that the underground vault, the heart of the colony's hidden past, still held mysteries. Though the salvagers had been driven away, the energy cores beneath the surface remained a secret that could draw unwanted attention in the future. They had to remain vigilant. Milan placed a hand on Liren's shoulder. "We have done enough to protect the town for now. Tomorrow we will continue rebuilding, but tonight, we rest." Liren nodded, smiling, "and we let Real sleep peacefully, knowing his world is safe." The next day, life continued in Ruan 9. The settlers worked side by side with Milan and Liren, repairing broken roads, building new homes and planting gardens. Milan taught them about the old mining machines and how to repurpose them for farming. Liren taught them about energy conservation and the delicate balance needed to protect the underground cores. Real grew quickly, learning to walk and speak, always watched by both his mother and Milan. The town thrived under their care. The settlers began to send small messages to nearby colonies, inviting traders, families, and skilled workers. Word spread slowly, carefully, so that only those willing to respect the town's new rules would arrive. Months passed. Ruin 9 had electricity in every building, clean water in every home, and thriving gardens that supplied food for the residents. The town was no longer a ghost, but a symbol of survival, cooperation, and hope. Humans and the last survivor of an alien species worked together to rebuild life where it had once been lost. One evening, Milan stood near the main tower, watching the sunset reflect across the town. Liren joined him, holding Riel in her arms. The child's silver hair shimmered in the fading light. "We did it," Milan said quietly. "Ruin 9 lives again," Liren smiled. "Not just because of us. Because we refused to give up and because others came to help. This town is alive because life wants to survive." Milan looked at her and nodded. "And because humans and aliens can work together even in the darkest places." She laughed softly, a sound full of warmth and hope. "Yes, even in the darkest places." From that day on, Ruin 9 became a place where new settlers arrived not to exploit, but to build. Families lived in the restored houses. Traders exchanged goods in the central square. The once empty streets were filled with laughter, conversations, and the sound of machinery working for life, not destruction. Milan and Liren worked side by side every day, teaching the settlers how to care for the town and its hidden treasures. They built a community where humans and aliens respected each other, where knowledge and courage were valued above greed, and where life in all its forms could flourish. One evening, as the twin moons rose above Ruin 9, the town glowed softly in their light. Riel laughed and ran through the streets, chasing a small mechanical bird. Milan watched him and then looked at Liren. "We did something important here," he said. "Yes," she replied, "we gave life a second chance." Ruin 9, the town once abandoned and forgotten, had become a home. And it would remain so, not because of money, power, or politics, but because humans and aliens chose to protect, nurture, and believe in life together.